From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Another notable piece of Trump's speech that he addressed the underwhelming performance of Republicans in the midterm elections last week. And predictably enough, President Trump does not think that President Trump is to blame.
Much criticism is being placed on the fact that the Republican Party should have done better. And frankly, much of this blame is correct. But the citizens of our country have not yet realized the full extent and gravity of the pain our nation is going through. And the total effect of the suffering is just starting to take hold. They don't quite feel it yet, but they will very soon. I have no doubt that by 2024, it will sadly be much worse, and they will see much more clearly what happened and what is happening to our country, and the voting will be much different. 2024. Are you getting ready? And I am too. I am too.
But clearly the results last week have strengthened the hand of President Trump's potential opponents in 2024. And also notable on Thursday was that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis at a press conference responded to some of the criticism, including from President Trump. Listen to this.
I don't think any governor got attacked more, particularly by corporate media, than me over my 4-year term. And yet, I think what you learn is all that's just noise. And really what matters is, are you leading? Are you getting in front of issues? Are you delivering results for people? And are you standing up for folks? And if you do that, then none of that stuff matters. And that's what we've done. We focused on results and leadership. And, at the end of the day, I would just tell people to go check out the scoreboard from last Tuesday night.
Kim, how do you score this one?
To go to Trump's points, people aren't feeling it. Come on. I mean, look at every exit poll, look at every other bit of survey. More than 70% of the country feels that the country's on the wrong track. They've got even worse grades to hand out when it comes to inflation, the cost of energy. People are dying every time they go to the grocery store, simply having to pay to buy a gallon of milk. They're feeling it. What the exit polls actually showed is that a lot of really core voters, including independents, were very wary, nonetheless, of giving some of these Republican candidates a shot in office, in part because of their connections with Donald Trump and some of the themes they were meditating on in the election, which were not what voters wanted to hear about. They didn't want to talk about the 2020 election. They wanted to talk about gas prices and other issues that are affecting them now. So that was not the issue. Trump knows it. What else is he going to say? He also, I would note, once again, tried to pull out his endorsement saying, I got 232 wins and only 22 losses. What that misses is that those losses include some of the most important races, the ones that were material to whether Republicans took the Senate in particular, including in Pennsylvania and Arizona and Nevada and New Hampshire. I actually saw a former member of the Trump administration saying that it doesn't matter much if you're talking about your win-loss record or if you're toting up the number of dog catcher positions you won in some place or another. What matters is the actual office and did you get it across the line? He didn't. And DeSantis, look, I think he's handling this the right way. He got a lot of blowback, Trump did, when he went after DeSantis in the run-up to the election with that jab calling him desanctimonious. And I think one of the reasons DeSantis has been getting some of that sympathy from voters and why they look askance at Trump is because he hasn't come back and decided to engage Trump in some sort of brawl and call him a name in turn. This is the high road to say, hey, look, when you're doing well, there is going to be incoming, which is funny, thereby highlighting it again that you're doing well. And also just saying, instead of directly going back to Trump and saying, knock it off, just saying, hey, anybody who's got a problem, let's just go look at what happened last Tuesday and look at the scoreboard. And that's a jab enough.
And it is notable that there are some polls now, post-election polls, that show Ron DeSantis in the lead for the potential Republican nomination for president in 2024. First, there's a YouGov survey. This is a national one, 1,500 U.S. adults. And if you look at the Republican breakdown, who do you want for president, Republican nominee for president in 2024? 41% Ron DeSantis, 39% Donald Trump. There's another one from the Republican Party of Texas. That one is 43% Ron DeSantis, 32% Donald Trump. And then there's one from the Club for Growth, and that's 2 states. In Iowa, it's 48 Ron DeSantis, 37 Donald Trump. And in New Hampshire, it's 52 Ron DeSantis, 37 Donald Trump. And so, Monet, those are some fascinating figures, particularly because they seem to have flipped just since the election. There were some similar surveys from later this summer that had Donald Trump still on top. And so it does seem like there's an opening for Ron DeSantis, but that also makes me wonder how much either of these candidates will be able to clear the field, or whether we will end up with 5 or 10 or 15 Republican candidates on that debate stage again in 2024.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating question. And if you look at DeSantis's ascent among GOP voters over the past couple of years, it's really come in phases. I think it began sort of during the spring and summer of 2020, when he really was thought of as maybe the leader among a field of Republican governors who were resisting lockdowns, who were criticizing the idea that businesses should be shut and that all of life had to come to a pause during COVID. But that also included Greg Abbott and Kristi Noem and Doug Ducey. And so DeSantis at that time was, again, kind of one of a pack of sort of new faces of a Republican style of leadership. Then there was a certain point where he became considerably more prominent than the others, and it was clear that a lot of the donors were starting to see him as the real alternative to Trump and someone who could recapture the White House in 2024. But if you looked at the polls, you still generally saw Trump leading, and that's something that Trump would brag about as much as possible, that he still had a pretty commanding lead. I think it's only within the past couple of months, and probably taking a big jump on Tuesday, on midterm day itself, that DeSantis really reached a new height as kind of the focus for primary voters, and did start to edge ahead of Trump and take commanding leads in some of these very early primary polls. And so I do think that as soon as he does declare that he's running at some point next year, you will immediately see a lot of Republican office holders endorse him in the way that a lot of Republican donors have already done. I don't think that he's going to completely clear the field. I think that people know there's still a long time between now and the actual primary elections. And so contenders like Mike Pence and Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo probably at this point still think that they're going to run. That's going to depend in part on how much money they're able to raise. But I do think that it's right to see that he clearly has established himself as the alternative to Trump in a way that could possibly give him a shot at having a smaller field of competitors and not fall into that 2016 trap of dividing the anti-Trump vote among, 8 or 9 other candidates.
But the result of that kind of a contested primary is always unpredictable because it is hard to know what Trump would do. We have a letter here from Michael who says, say Trump loses in the GOP primary and announces a third-party candidacy. Would that hurt or help the GOP brand with moderates and independents? It's clear from the midterms that the GOP did the best where state candidates were less associated with Trump. And Kim, I think that's an interesting question. It might help in the long term, but it is hard to imagine a Republican candidate winning the 2024 presidential race if Trump is on the ballot as a third-party candidate.
Yeah, I think that's true, although I think we're a long way from that point or that question. I mean, would he do such a thing? I guess it's possible. Except for, on the other hand, if the reason that Trump is losing is because Republicans have very much consolidated around a rival to him, and that's also just as possible. How much running room does he have to do that? I don't want to underrate the potential for a lot of people that are very devoted at the moment to Trump to change their allegiance if someone else comes along that they also feel has some fight. But Trump has a lot of liabilities in addition to voters' dislike over his behavior on January 6th, etc. He's going to be going on 80. There's a lot of voters that are wary about stuff like that. So I just think we're a long way from that happening. Yes, it's possible he could go down that road. But I also think that the dynamics are such that if he did, I'm not quite sure how much momentum that would have.
But it may depend also on which Republican candidate ended up winning the primary and vanquishing Trump. Because, I mean, if you're thinking about Trump superfans in some of those Rust Belt states like Michigan or Wisconsin or Ohio. It is easier, at least for me, to imagine those people deciding that even if Trump is on the ballot or tells them to stay home, tells his supporters to stay home, it is easy for me to imagine a lot of them liking Ron DeSantis enough that they would go to the polls anyway. And Monet, I'm not sure that's true for everybody else who might be on that Republican stage. We'll give you the last word.
Well, I think you've keyed in on one of DeSantis' key selling points, which is that he appeals both to the establishment wing of the party and has governed Florida for the past 4 years in a way that's in keeping with a traditional Republican Party approach, but he also has completely established himself as a fighter and a culture warrior, someone who's able to excite conservatives and someone, frankly, who's able to anger progressives and is fully willing to engage in that area, which is why Trump was able to ascend in 2016 in the first place. And I think that his margin of victory in Florida a couple weeks ago is representative of his ability to merge those two sides. And so I do think that compared with someone like Glenn Youngkin, who is more purely establishment, he probably would have a good chance of taking that same strength to a Republican primary field and, basically keeping the party on board if he is able to get the nomination, as opposed to creating an opening that would allow Trump to divide the party.
Thank you, Monet and Kim. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we will be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.